Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us for the learning of Torah Hashem, Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach. As always, we begin with special appreciation to TorahAnytime.com for giving us the opportunity to be Marbitz Torah all over the world. We also thank Kolaloshin for its global platform, and YouTube, and our subscribers, and our Zoomers, and those of you here that are joining us in our flagship station here at the Gudis Yisrael Bezev of Fairways Lakewood. Tonight we have a diamond sponsor, the Feldins, very special. They're dedicating this year in honor of their father's 91st birthday, Max Feldman, who stems from Galicia and is a direct descendant of Elimelech from Lezhensk, and he was a founding member, the last surviving founding member of the Orthodox Shul in West Orange. Of his special traits, he has a special trait, he has a special trait of good humor. And you know, good humor is a very, very important trait. It's an important trait for marriage. It's an important trait for getting along with people. And a person can say that it lends itself to Arichas Yom. So a very big happy birthday to Max Feldman. He should have Gesund and Atzlacha in Ruchnius and in Gashmius. So it's interesting, Moshe Rabbeinu leaves Paro, and it says, Vayifen, he turned Vayetze me'im Paro, and went out from the throne room. So if you're schooled with noticing things in a pasuk, it'll right away strike you that the word Vayifen seems to be superfluous. It should have just simply said Vayetze me'im Paro. He went out. Why does it say Vayifen Vayetze me'im Paro? Now, when I saw this diuk, it struck me that the custom that we always adopt in Yiddishkeit is to give kavod l'malchus, is to give honor to royalty, even Goyish royalty. As when Moshe Rabbeinu told Paro that by Makas B'chayris, he said to Paro, "V'yordu kol avadecha eila elai." All your servants are going to come down to me. Now Paro came down, but Rashi says he was giving kavod l'malchus, so he didn't say you're going to come. He was giving kavod. I also always wanted to learn that maybe he was trying to scare Paro. You know, after all, you're a firstborn yourself. Maybe you won't be around anymore. But Rashi tells us this Yesod, and it's a Yesod that's repeated throughout Navi, that we give kavod even to Goyish Malchus. We give kavod to royalty. So if that's the case, then we would think that Moshe Rabbeinu would back out. That's what we do. When we give honor, we don't turn our back on the person. We back out. That's why many people, when they go out of shul, they don't turn their back on the shul, but they back out of the door, right? Not to turn their back on the shul, not to turn their back on the Aron Kodesh. So here, however, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu did not give the kavod. It says Vayifen. He turned around. He turned his back on Paro. So indeed, I found that the Orach Chaim HaKadosh makes a point of this. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh says that he did it to be mezalzel in Paro, to disgrace Paro, because he wanted to point out to him that you made a mention after the Makkah that Hashem HaTzadik, that Hashem is righteous, and still you're going back on your word. And therefore, he turned his back on him because he was going back on his word. It's also possible, I thought of another possibility, that the reason why it says that he turned is because he didn't want to give honor in the throne room of Paro. Was a lot of Avodah Zarah, was a lot of getchkes, a lot of idolatry. And he didn't want to give an honor, and it should be misconstrued that he was giving honor to the idols. So that's why he turned his back. Okay, so that's the simple thing. However, there's a gem of a medrash. And I say this as a gem of a medrash because I want to show you how tzaddikim that learn Torah, they just don't learn pshatim. But the Torah becomes integral with the way they live. This is a rather remarkable story. But what does the Medrash say? The Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu noticed that Paro was taking counsel with some of his advisors. And therefore, Vayifen, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu turned around not to listen. In other words, he gave them the respect that since Paro was speaking with his advisors, it wasn't proper that he should listen in. He wasn't invited. So Vayifen, he turned around in order not to eavesdrop. So now let me tell you a remarkable story. We know that in Russia, the Jews were many times arrested on trumped-up charges and never heard of again. Especially they hated the rabbiner, the rabbi. After all, they felt that religion was the opium of the people. So in a town called Bechoiv, they arrested Rav David, the Rav of the town, with some trumped-up charge. When they came and they had the court case, so the judges started to speak with one another in French. And Rav David walked away. So the head judge, the head of the tribunal, sharply reprimanded him. You're an arrested man. You don't get to stroll where you want. So Rav David explained that when he saw them talking French, he understood that they wanted to talk that he shouldn't understand. And since Rav David was fluent in French, he walked away so as not to listen to what they had to say. The judge was so impressed by that show of honesty that he exonerated him on the spot. It saved his life. So Rav David of Bechov said, where did I get this idea? I got this idea from this medrash, Vayifen Vayetze Mi Paro, that Moshe Rabbeinu turned around, he didn't want to listen. That's where I got the idea. See, that's the way big people learn Torah. They take what they learn and they integrate it into their behavior. In other words, he learned it and he filed it away in a place where he might need to use it. So I was thinking of a modern day integration of this idea. You're on the phone with somebody, you finish talking, right? And you end the conversation. And the person on the other end thought they hung up, but they didn't hang up. And they continue talking to their wife or to someone else. You're not allowed to listen. You're not allowed to listen. They don't know that you're listening. You have to be yifen. You have to turn away. The etymology of eavesdropping is because they used to stand outside and stand under the eaves so that the rain shouldn't fall on them. And when they stood under the eaves, they heard people talking in the house. That's where eavesdropping comes from. Eavesdropping is not allowed in Yiddishkeit. Of course, there's one notable exception where eavesdropping saved Klal Yisrael. What's the notable exception? Mordechai. Right? Mordechai heard Bigsan Viserys speaking in Tarshish. Tarshish was a very rare language. But Mordechai, another name of Mordechai HaTzadik was Bilshon. He was called Bilshon because he was Bal HaLashon. He was a linguist. He spoke all 70 languages. Gemara tells us that a Beis Din has to have several members that speak 70 languages. Mordechai spoke all 70 languages. So he understood Bigsan and Seresh, their Tarshish language, and he heard they were plotting an assassination of Achashverosh, and he uncovered it, and he told it to Esther, and of course that saved the king, and later on it brought honor to Mordechai. Kocha Yasal Ish, Asher HaMelech wants to honor him, and that was the turning point of the story of the Megillah. But in general terms, you're not allowed to eavesdrop. And once I'm already speaking about this, I want to give credit to a Erlich Mensch I have in my shul, a very big Talmid Chacham, a Musmach from Reb David Feinstein. His name is Rabbi Dov Trapper. And he brought to my attention, which is, really this is something that is practical in shuls all across the world. He brought to my attention that when somebody is sitting in the bathroom, they could hear Baruch Hu, they could hear Hashem's name, and it's not good. You're not supposed to think about Hashem's name and listen to it when you're sitting in the bathroom. So he told me that what he would do to solve the problem is when he sat in the bathroom, he would hum to himself. So he shouldn't listen. But then he said, you know what, he could be mizaka everybody and put a noisemaker in the bathroom. And the noisemaker in the bathroom would block out the sound. Now that's such an example of Yiras Shamayim. Because many people say, who knows, what's the difference, it's not my fault, it happens, I'm not intending to do it. But a person that goes out of his way, that's the meaning of when we say in Rosh Chodesh Benching, right? Chaim shel Yiras Shamayim v'yiras chet. A person that's afraid to sin. Right? This is a type of eavesdropping, listening that you're not supposed to do. So you put in the two bathrooms noisemakers, which by the way has another benefit, because when we're in the bathroom, it's really not sneistic that people should hear us relieving ourselves. That's an act of an animal, and it's not sneistic. So the noisemaker also makes it that people don't hear you in the bathroom either. So it's really, it's a novel idea, but it's a wonderful idea. I give him a lot of credit. And he went ahead and he ordered it and he put it in. Man of action. It's a really nice thing. At the end of this week's parsha, we talk about the great mitzvah of tefillin. There is a Be'er Heitiv in Hilchos Tefillin that says that tefillin is the most chashuva mitzvah saseh. Now that Be'er Heitiv is a really, really, really incredible novelty, because you understand that Torah is a mitzvah saseh, and Shabbos, which is Shakol Keneged Kol HaTorah Kula, is a mitzvah saseh, and Tefillah is a mitzvah saseh. But he says that tefillin is the most chashuv mitzvah saseh. So it says in the pasuk, "L'chaya l'cha la'is al yadcha u'letatafa u'lezikaron beinenecha." It should be a ice al yadcha ulizikaron beineinecha, leman tiyeh Torahs Hashem beficha. What's the purpose that you put this on your hand and opposite your eyes? In order that the Torah of Hashem should be in your mouth. So the Ramban explains this kipshutai, that the tefillin, which we started wearing when we came out of Mitzrayim, is a cause to remember that Hashem took us out of Egypt. And since Hashem saved us from bondage, therefore, since He saved us from servitude, He is now like our Adain, like our boss, and therefore it follows that we should fulfill His Torah. So that's the most simple, the Ramban. Ramban is one of the greatest Rishonim. He learns, which remembers that Hashem took us out of Egypt. He saved us from Egypt and we became His. And when we remember that we have to fulfill His Torah. Also, we know that the tefillin on the hand reminds us, what do we say in the tefillah before putting on tefillin? Right? We put it on the yad to remember the zroya netuya, His outstretched arm. Now, what's Hashem's outstretched arm? What does that mean? Zroya netuya. He took us out with yod chazaka ubezroya netuya. What does it mean? We put it on our arm to remember the zroya netuya. So if you refer to the Haggadah says zroya netuya zu acherev. That's the sword. Now, that makes it more puzzling. Where was the sword used in Egypt? There were no clashing of swords in Egypt. And not only that, but even at the Yam Suf there were no clashing of swords. Hashem yilochem lochem v'atem tacharishan. We didn't raise a sword. So the Dvar Aaron, Sechet Tzadik L'Bracha Zchusi Yogan Aleinu Hashem Yimkim Damai, says that it says Zoyin Netuya Zua Cherev, and it says that Hashem v'horag es b'chayreihem, He killed the firstborns. And the Rambam says, like we learn in Masechta Sanhedrin, hereg is beheading. So therefore he learns that the Zroya Netuya Zua Cherev refers that it reminds us of the killing of the firstborns, which of course catapulted us to be redeemed. Reb Chaim Kanievsky, in his Pirush on Siddur, I saw him say something else. Oh, it might have been in his Haggadah. In his Haggadah, he says that the Cherev, there's a medrash, only Reb Chaim would know such a medrash. There's a medrash that when the Egyptians were being pummeled by the waves of the Yam Suf, the waves, the medrash said, Hashem made them feel like knives. And therefore that was the Cherev. The Cherev was the knives that they felt by the Yam Suf. Either way, when we put the tefillin on our hand and we remember the Zroya Netuya, we're thinking about Egyptian thoughts. That Hashem saved us from Egypt, either with Makas B'chayris, or either the waves of the Yam Suf. There is another sword that was used in Egypt. Another sword. It says, L'makeh Mitzrayim bivchayreihem, that Hashem smote the Egyptians through the firstborns. Right? That's what we say. When do we say that? On Shabbos. L'makeh Mitzrayim bivchayreihem ki li'olam chazdai. So we all know what this is talking about. This is that when it came to the Makas B'chayris, the firstborn said, let them go. We don't want to die. Moshe Rabbeinu was batting 1,000. If he says that the firstborns are going to die, we don't want to die. And Paro refused. So the firstborns revolted. And therefore it says that more people died in the revolt of the firstborns than died in Makkah's Bechiris. That's the meaning, L'makeh Mitzrayim b'vchayreim, that he hit the Egyptians through their Bechirim. And by the way, this is another manifestation of incredible Midah Keneged Midah. I pointed this out to you in the past, that Paro was the originator of the cruelty of our later enemies. Hitler had Jew kill Jew. That's why he appointed Jews in the Judenrat to say which people should be sent to the camps. And Jews had to do it to Jews. Then in the camps, they had Jewish capos being cruel to the Jews. Paro did the same thing. When he wanted to kill the babies, who did he ask? The Jewish midwives. When he wanted the babies to be thrown in the water, who did he ask? We should throw the babies in the water. Who did he have as the shaitrim, making sure that the Jews should work? Jewish shaitrim. He used Jew against Jew. He says, I'm not getting my hands dirty. So therefore, Midah Keneged Midah, Hashem now had Egyptians kill Egyptians. He had a civil war in Egypt. This is all. So that's the Ramban's pshat. Reb Miller had a very practical application of what it means that you should put it on your hand and your head. L'man tia teres Hashem b'ficha. Reb Miller said that when we put on tefillin in the morning, it should be a subliminal reminder to us, when am I going to learn today? You should put it on your hand and on your head. L'man tia teres Hashem b'ficha, to ensure. Now, in those days, they wore tefillin the whole day. Today, we don't wear tefillin the whole day because we're afraid that we won't keep a clean body. But in those days, they wore tefillin the whole day. So it's a reminder to always learn Torah. V'agisa b'yayim v'layla. Now, by the way, L'man tia teres Hashem b'ficha is a source why women don't put on tefillin. Because it says, V'ayil lo'isal yadcho l'toy tafes beinenecha L'man tia teres Hashem b'ficha. And since women don't have the mitzvah of Torah, they don't have the mitzvah of tefillin. We also learn out from L'man tia teres Hashem b'ficha that we have to write the tefillin only on kosher hides, because it has to be mutter b'ficha. It has to be something that's mutter in your mouth. However, I'm going to tell you two more pshatim of L'man tia teres Hashem b'ficha. The first is an idea that I thought of. There's a famous Gemara that says that the famous wife of Rameir had a very, very intelligent, wise wife. Her name was Bruria. Bruria once saw someone sitting and reading and not saying the Gemara. So Batabe, she, so to speak, kicked him. I don't know if it was figuratively or even maybe physically, probably not physically, but she really rebuked him. And she said, it says, Arucha bakol ushmura. If the Torah is arranged in all of your limbs, then you'll remember it. But if you don't say it, if you don't articulate it, it's like the Klozmer Rebbe used to say, mit der aller Remache vor mishin samache giden. If it's not arucha bakol, if you don't use all your faculties, then it's not shmura, then it's not maintained. And the Gemara over there in Eruvin, on Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis, also quotes another pasuk. It says, it's a famous pasuk, Chayim heim l'motze'ehem. It is life to those that find it. Now, the little meaning of that pasuk is remarkable, that the true meaning of life is to learn Torah. If you find it, you find the true joy of life. But the Gemara says, Al tikrei l'motze'ehem el l'motzi'ehem. To those that articulate it, that pronounce it. You're supposed to say the learning. When you say the learning, you remember it. Now, I'm going to say an aside over here. And really, I question whether I should even mention it. But I was somewhere where I didn't have a shas, and I didn't remember the daf in Eruvin. So I put it into AI, and I asked where this story is from Bruria, and it told me Eruvin Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis. And then I wanted it to quote me the words, so it quoted me the words, and it interpreted the Gemara wrong. I'm mentioning it because it's very important to know that you cannot rely on AI. So it says Arucha Bakol Shmura, arranged Bakol and Shmura, and so the AI says Bakol means with a voice. So Bruya was saying that you should use your voice. So I wrote right away to AI, but Bakol is spelled with a kuf, and the Bakol in the pasuk is spelled with a chaf. So it answers me, you are correct, but sometimes the chaf and the kuf are interchangeable. So I said to it, but then the Gemara would say, Al tikrei Bakol, ela Bakol with a kuf. I said, rather, the meaning is that it says with all the 248 limbs, that's what Bakol means, as the Rishonim explain, and therefore it means even with the mouth. So it's interesting, it writes to me, you are right to push back, and you are correct that it should have said Al Tikrei, and I stand corrected in the meaning of this piece of Talmud. So you have to be extremely careful. It's not a tool that you could trust. You could use it as a concordatia, but you can't rely on it. But anyway, why did I bring this up? Because I think that this idea of learning with saying the words, because it aids in the memory, is implicit in this pasuk by tefillin, because it says ulezikaron beineinecha. If you want to remember it, leman tia Torah Hashem b'ficha, the Torah should be pronounced with your mouth. That's a reminder that for proper recall of Torah study, it's better not just simply to peruse the Gemara, but to actually articulate it. But now let me tell you something from the Sefer HaChaim, from the brother of the Maral. Very interesting how he learns L'man tia Torah Hashem b'ficha. The Sefer HaChaim, from the brother of the Maral Prague, we quoted him a few weeks ago also. He says that there's a zoyar that says that when a person sits at the table eating and he says Torah at the table, there's a malach called Suriel that brings that Torah that was said by the table and crowns Hashem with it. It's a zoyar. And he suggests that the malach was called Suriel. Sur means to turn away from God, because many times people eat and they get wrapped up in the pleasures of eating and the haughtiness of eating that they forget about Hashem. So when a person says Torah at the table, he brings that Torah to Hashem. And he says that is embedded in Laman Tia Torahs Hashem Beficha, that the Torah of Hashem should be in your mouth when you're eating with your mouth. That's the way the Maral's brother, the Sefer HaChaim, learns. Now it says, it should be a sign on your hand, and for frontlets opposite your eyes. So Rav Leibel Katz, in his beautiful Sefer Oyel Aryeh, Zecher Tzadik Livracha Schusa Yagan Aleinu, how we miss him, one of the terrible casualties of COVID. So he says that the Gemara says that hasach bein tefillin shel yad letefillin shel reish, that if a person is guilty when putting on his tefillin, and he talks in between putting on the tefillin of the hand and tefillin of the head, chayzrin me'archei hamilchama, he's not allowed to fight in a Jewish battle. In other words, it says that somebody who has an aveira is turned back from the milchamas mitzvah, and included in this is one who talks in between the tefillin of the hand and the tefillin of the head. So Reb Leibel Katz makes the point, why is it so important that there should be a no interruption connection? He said because Hashem is telling us that doing without thinking is very, very weak. You know, in Birchas Kriya Shema, in Ava Rabba or Ava Soilam, whether you daven Ashkenaz or Sfard, we say a very important tefillah. V'dabek libeinu b'mitzvaysecha. Attach our minds to your mitzvahs. We shouldn't be doing it just mitzvahs anoshim milimuda. We shouldn't just be doing it out of habit. We shouldn't be doing it by rote. And therefore you have to attach the tefillin of the hand action to the tefillin of the head thought, that it should be. Today the word that everybody uses is meaningful. Meaningfulness. Years ago, like 60, 70 years ago, Rav Miller said that the problem will be in the future, the problem will be shitchias, that people will do things superficially, without thinking. So whether it's the tefillin, the connecting of the tefillin of the head to the tefillin of the hand, whether it's to remind us not to say, whether it's to remind us to have in mind Moida Ani Lefanecha in the morning, or Asher Yotzer, or to take a significant look at the mezuzah. This is what we say. And Aseres Yimei Tshuva, we say in Al Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'vidui peh. For the sin that we sin before you in confession. What's the sin that you're doing with confession? We're confessing and we're not thinking about what we're confessing about. We have an Al Chet about that. Al Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'vidui peh. Or in the Orchos Chaim LaRosh, you know, if anybody wants a project, I did a daily pirish on Orchos Chaim LaRosh. It's all on TorahAnytime.com. You can learn the entire 155 pieces of advice with the Orchos Chaim LaRosh. It's all on TorahAnytime.com. It's really, I started putting it on YouTube also. The beginning of it is on YouTube too, but it's all on TorahAnytime.com. The Rosh wrote a sefer called Orchos Chaim, Ways of Life. You can get it. It's an art scroll book. It's beautiful. And I spoke a whole shir on the entire Orchos Chaim LaRosh. So he says over there the same idea. Let me quote you verbatim. V'toiv loimer b'chol yom slach lanu. We say in Kriya Shema, forgive us. I mean, in Shema Esra, slach lanu v'inu kichatanu. He says we should say every day slach lanu, asher lo kivnu b'birchas slach lanu. Forgive us for not having kavanah when we say slach lanu. That's what he says. And he wrote this 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago, this was a problem already 1,000 years ago. But I think that there's another reason, besides this reason, why we emphasize the connection between action, between the yad that's opposite the heart, and the tefillin that we put on our head. And that's because Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said, the great Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, said that the greatest distance between 2 points in the world is the distance between the head and the heart. That's such a profound statement. You see, we know a lot of things, but we haven't integrated it. We know it. And we would swear to it that we believe in it. But we didn't integrate it. By the way, where do we say this always? We always say this in Aleinu. V'yadata hayayim v'ashivaisa elevavecha. Know it today, but bring it to the heart. And I love to give an example of what this means. Because maybe this is just words to people. It's just gibberish. So let me explain to you what this means. If I would be speaking to 1,000 people, and I would ask the room, does anybody believe that when they're davening, God is listening to them? So everybody would raise their hand, yes. After all, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem Shemei Tefillah. Everybody would say yes. And people would even be insulted by the question. But if Hashem is listening to you, then how could you daydream? How could you space out? The answer is you know it, but you didn't integrate it. That's why the tefillin of hand has to be next to the hand, which is opposite the heart, has to be next to the head. We have to take what we know and make it a part of our heart. Rav Moshe, attributed the death of the righteous Uziyahu to this flaw. Uziyahu was one of the 4 people given the greatest privilege that a Levi could have to carry the Aron. The Navi tells us that the Aron looked like it would stumble, and Uziyahu went to catch it. And as soon as he dived, he broke his neck and he died. And Chazal tell us that it was a punishment because on the great level that he should have known that the Aron is noisei es noisav. The Aron carries those that carry it. You don't have to catch the Aron. The Aron carries itself. Now, you could understand that Uziyahu, as a bearer of the Aron, knew this. He knew it. But he didn't integrate it. And when he saw it stumble, his head kicked in, not his heart. Because he didn't make it part of him that the Aron carries itself. So you'll ask, how do you make it part of yourself? There's a clue to this in the Haggadah Shel Pesach. It's something that we all know. In the Haggadah Shel Pesach it says, Afilu kulanu chachamim. Kulanu nevainim. Kulanu zekenim. There isn't even children to teach. Kulanu yoidim es hatayr. We all know it all. Mitzvah aleinu l'saper b'yetzias Mitzrayim. It's still a mitzvah to say it. It begs the question, if we know it, why is it a mitzvah to say it? Let's learn something else. Chal Avram says, let's learn Zayah, let's learn Chak. If we know it already, why are we doing it? So the Rambam says it's because the Haggadah is not an intellectual exercise, it's an expression of thanks. So therefore, even if we know it, we still have to say thanks. But the Bali Musar say that the answer is you might know it, but you know how you're going to get it into your heart, into your bones? By doing it over and over and over and over again. That's how you get it into your bones. And by the way, this is what they did in Sabatka. In Sabatka, they went out into the woods and they said something over 100 times in order to make it part of them. So they would go, for example, and they would say 100 times the pasuk Toya Vas Hashem Kol Gevalev. It's an abomination of the Lord, the arrogant heart. And they would say it 100 times until it became part of them. Or they would say 100 times, this world is just a preparation for the next one. And when they said it 100 times, it went from the head to the heart. That's the idea of the tefillin against the heart being uninterrupted with the tefillin in the head. You have to take what's in the head and integrate it into the heart. Now let me share you, before we leave the subject of tefillin, let me share you something from my Rebbe, Ramesha. It says, V'haya lecha la'is al yadka u'lezikaron b'neinecha. So the Gemara says, in Menachos, says, V'haya lecha la'is al yadcha. It should be for you. The tefillin of the hand, you have to cover. You put it under your jacket. That's why we cover the tefillin of our hand, because it says it should be private. But Rashi says is that sharaya oisam yiskranes, that those that see it will remember the miracle. So Ramesha says it's interesting. The tefillin shel yad is a private, and the tefillin shoraish is a public display. The nations will see Hashem on you and they will fear you. So Ramesha said there's a very important reason for this. He said before you are capable to influence others, you first have to absorb it and acquire it yourself. So you first need v'haya la'is al yadcha, and then u'letaitafos b'neinecha. You know, it's a real ridiculous thing that we find by the Goyim, that the pastor, the father, is giving advice about child raising and about marriage. He doesn't know anything about child raising, and he doesn't know anything about marriage. It has to be first la'is al yadcha. First you have to acquire it and kain it yourself, and then it could be l'toitafes b'neinecha. There's a Maimar Chazal. Kshoit atzmecha, beautify yourself. V'achar kach kshoit acherim. There's a Gemara towards the end of Masechtas Chulin that we don't worry that when we roast the liver, we don't worry that the blood will be reabsorbed by the liver. The Gemara says, because Aidi de Torah lemiflat, since it's so busy exuding blood, loy mivla, it doesn't absorb. So the Heilige Shinnever Rebbe, the Shinnever Rebbe was the one of the Gainistic children of the Heilige Divrei Chaim, the sons of Rav. The Shinnever Rebbe said, there's a remez over here. You know, there are some people that darshan, and it says in Pirkei Avos, there are some people that are no'a dairesh ve'eina no'a mekayim. They darshan nice, but they don't fulfill what they darshan. So he said, yeah, Nebuch, I did the Torah lemifla. They're so busy telling other people lemivla, they don't absorb it themselves. In order to be able, this is important for parents, it's important for rebbeim, it's important for moros. Why are some rebbeim matzliach and some are not? You know why? Because dvorim hayotzim min halev nichnasim l'lev. Things that come out of the heart enter the heart. If the person doesn't have it in his heart, even he could be the greatest darshan in the world, but divrei emes nikarim, words of truth are recognizable. It has to be dvarim hayotzim min halev. It has to be things that come out of the heart. Those are nichnasim l'lev. Those enter the heart. There's a famous pasuk, "Ulachol b'nei Yisrael lo yecharatz kelev l'shaynai." That even though no one ever escaped Egypt, the borders were surrounded by ferocious Doberman pinchers, ferocious guard dogs. Yet the night of Egypt, "L'chol b'nei Yisrael lo yecharatz kelev l'shaynai." No dog barked. Now, not only was it the fact that they were trained to bark, but also it says that when the Malach HaMavis comes, it says, Kalovim Bochim, the dogs yelp. And the Malach HaMavis came that night, because not only did Hashem kill the Bechorim, but it says, Ein bayis she'ein sham meis. There was no house that didn't have a dead. So what about a house that didn't have a Bechor? So then the Mashkas, the Malach HaMavis, killed the oldest in the house. So the dog should be yelping. But L'chol b'nei Yisrael lo yecharatz kelev l'shaynai. So in Shmais Rabbah, it gives an extraordinary reward that the dogs received. It says because they didn't bark, so they were awarded that they should be given by Jews the treifa throughout the generations. It says, "Ubasa basada treifa lo yisechelu." If meat is torn in the field, it wasn't slaughtered, you shouldn't eat it. Like kelev tashlichanaisa, you should give it to the dogs. Why? Says the Medrash, because they didn't bark, they were awarded with this parnasa throughout the ages. Dog kind was awarded, that's one award. They had another award. This is an award that people don't know. But there's a special din that in the treating of the parchment for the Sefer Torah, you're supposed to use the dung of a dog. And again, it's a reward for L'chol b'nei Yisrael lo yecharatz kelev l'shaynai. Now the famous question they ask is the donkeys also did a service for the Jews? It says when we left Mitzrayim, each one of us left Mitzrayim with 70 donkeys of Rechush Gadol. There's another girsa, 90 donkeys. So the donkeys were also rewarded. But what was their reward? That you redeem them, and if not, varafta, you break its neck. So the donkeys get their necks broken. The dogs get parnasa throughout the ages. They get to treat the Sefer Torah. What's going on? And most of the Mefarshim give the same answer. It's a lot easier to schlep a load full of heavy things than to keep your mouth shut when it's usually open. To keep your mouth shut, that's a big thing. Now we know it's a big thing. We know the Gemara in Eruvin tells us, there's a famous pasuk. The pasuk says, Toila Eretz al Blima. Now literally, Toila Eretz al Blima means that the world is suspended al Blima, on nothingness. You look up in a telescope, the world is there, there's no pedestal. There's no structure holding the world, it's hanging in the air. It's Toila Eretz al Blima, it's a remarkable thing. But the Gemara homiletically explains this pasuk as with a stupendous Jewish idea. Ein ha'olam miskayim, the world only survives al mi shebaylam piv b'shas mariva, on somebody who knows to shut his mouth in a time of quarrel. That personal might, what we call in Pirkei Avos Moishel Beruchai, somebody that has control over his spirit, that ability to be Boilim Piv B'Shas Meriva, and we're talking about somebody that has what to say, but chooses to keep quiet at a time of quarrel, upholds the world. The Gemara then goes on to make its incredible statement. What's a person's skill in this world? Which is a strange question. It depends who you are. Some people are doctors, some people are lawyers, some people are plumbers. But there is a universal umnus. Train yourself to be like a mute, to know when to keep your mouth shut, when to zip it. The dogs were rewarded an amazing reward throughout the ages. And to treat the iris of the Sefer Torah, because they always barked and they kept their mouth shut. Lo yechratz kelav l'shayna. You know, it's interesting. The Chavetz Chaim, who dedicated his life to guarding the mouth, Chavetz Chaim says that the Baal Lashon Hara, the gossiper, in biblical times was punished with tsaras, which was a terrible punishment. You had to leave and isolate yourself, badad yeshev. It could be for years. Mitzayra is motzi ra, the person that speaks bad. So he says, today we don't have tsaras. What takes the place of the punishment of tsaras? So the Chavetz Chaim writes that tsaras is, Mitzayra is chashav kameis, it's like dead. And who else is chashav like dead? Oni chashav kameis. So he says that instead of the punishment of tsaras, people who speak habitually Lashon Hara are punished with poverty. It's a Chavetz Chaim. And therefore, it fits like a glove that therefore the dogs who didn't speak, they were rewarded with parnasa. Like Kelev Tashlich, I say, they were rewarded for parnasa. It's the reverse. If you keep your mouth shut, then you'll be rewarded with parnasa. It's fascinating that Rav Katz, in his Oyel Aryeh, explains this just the opposite. He says, the dogs, they were given some meat. But the donkeys, their whole body became holy. It says you have to redeem it. You have to redeem it with the sheep. Their whole bodies became holy. He says because the dog didn't do anything. He just held back from doing something. But the donkeys did a service with their very bodies. And he just uses this as a springboard to say how much reward there is for people who help Klal Yisrael. Imagine if you have the opportunity to carry boxes for Tomchei Shabbos. You're using your body for Klal Yisrael. You have a chance to shovel the snow in front of a shul. You're using your body for Klal Yisrael. People that carry the Sidurim back, they're using their body for Klal Yisrael. He just points out that there's a reward. But I can't believe it's so late already. Before I tell you, I want to tell you a story. I want to thank our diamond sponsor, the Feldins. Again, wish a happy birthday to their father on his 91st birthday. 91 is B'Gematria Amen. Max Feldman should have a gesunte Leben, nachas, good cognitive abilities to enjoy and prosper in life till the coming of Mashiach. If you would like to sponsor next week's share, Shalach, you do not have a sponsor, 718-916-3100. You text me, 718-916-3100, or email me at rmmwsi, that's Rabbi Moshe Meir Weiss, Staten Island, at AOL.com. Although I'm in Lakewood now, but I'm not going to change it. It's a very popular email, so I'm not going to change it. Still connected. Libby is also by Staten Island. Was there for 38 years. In Brisk, there was a terrible feud. There was a terrible fight between two groups. And we know Machloikis is a terrible thing. Machloikis is the letters Chelik Mavis, a portion of death. It says even infants die for the sin of Machloikis, like it happened by the Adas Kera. So the Heilige Reb Yosef Dov Soloveitchik of Brisk went over to an influential member of the community, one of the Nichbadei Ha'ir, one of the well-respected members, and he asked him if he could get involved in order to try to bring peace between the two factions. It's not good. It bodes ill for the whole city that there's such a machlokes. And the man turned him down and said, I prefer to remain neutral. So he said, it's a big thing to make shalom. He said, I think it's important not to get involved. So Rabbi Yosef Dov told him as follows. He said, it says that when, it's a Gemara in Bava Basra, that when the Malach HaMavis comes to town, dogs cry. They yelp. When Eliyahu comes, dogs laugh. The tzachakin. On the night of Pesach, both happened. It was a time of redemption, so Eliyahu was there. It was also a time of the Malach HaMavis, the Mashkos. So the dogs didn't know what to do. Should they cry or should they yelp? Or should they yelp or should they laugh? So they decided to be neutral. He said, being neutral is good for dogs. That's what he told them. Being neutral is good for dogs. But chashuva people make peace. Now, The lesson over here, we're talking about hearing something, integrating it. None of us like confrontation. None of us want to get involved. I'll tell you, in my career of Rabbanis, the silent majority is the silent majority. Nobody wants to get involved. I got my own problems. But the truth of the matter is, one of the things that are Eichel Perisayim Ba'ilam Azev Karen Kayemis Oilam Haba is Avos Shalom Bein Adam L'Chavera, bringing peace between people. That's why it says Heve Mitalmido Shel Aaron HaKohen. Be from the Talmud of Aaron, who is Oyev Shalom V'Roidev Shalom. He loved peace and he chased peace. He didn't say, nah, I just want to get along with both sides. I don't want to make any waves. I don't want to become anybody's. No, Aaron was Roidev Shalom. Remember what I told you about the Mizbeach? That it says that on the Mizbeach you can't cut the Mizbeach with metal, because it's a peacemaker. It makes peace between us and our fathers in heaven when it atones for us. And Rashi says, then surely a human, if he makes peace, he'll be protected from metal, from car accidents, from bullets, from scalpels, from root canal drills. The idea of making peace, it shouldn't be a lost art, especially what the Rambam tells us. The Rambam says in Hilchos Chanukah, Shekol Torah Kula Nitna La'asa Shalom Ba'il. That's the whole Torah. If we're Bnei Torah, that's the whole Torah. Shinem Adrachel Darchei Noyam V'chol Nesivosei Shalom. Its ways are ways of sweetness, and all its paths are paths of peace. We have an opportunity to make peace with people and go over and say, there's two sides to this. Let's be intelligent. Let's work it out. Let's see each other's side. It's not healthy that people shouldn't get along. Hashem has tremendous displeasure when his children, just like a parent, when the children are not getting along, it causes the parents such pain. We're all Hashem's children. When they're not getting along, it causes Hashem pain. People that take away that pain, it's such an amazing thing. I want to thank you all for coming and wish everybody a good night and a good Shabbos.